and welcome to Scale of Justice here on Global Television when Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Wiyag Mofwegbe, your host. Now, the last couple of days, of course, even though that has been here for quite a number of years, have been marked by flooding, particularly up north of Nigeria. The climax perhaps being what we have seen in a place like Borno State, particularly in that state's capital, which is Maiduguri. It has raised questions about whether or not Nigeria has made enough investment or even paid significant, appreciable attention to the issue of flooding, whether it's coming from some kind of dam or it's as a result of torrential rain. Time and again, issues have also been raised, particularly as it has to do with legal framework around the environment. But then that appears to be a conversation that is long drawn out. At this point in time, is it still salient to talk about whether or not Nigeria has laws that recognize the realities of today as they have to do with the environment? If those laws do exist, for example, what are some of the obstacles between the implementers and the actual implementation of these laws? Those will form the crux of our conversation in the next 24 minutes on the program. My guest, who happens to be a subject matter expert, will be helping us to shed light and highlighting the talking points. When we return after this break, please stay with us. Well, thank you, everyone, again, for joining us on the program. My guest is a lawyer and someone who has what you might want to call more than sizable experience under his belt when it comes to the issues of environment. He also is the Executive Director, Environment Defenders Network, Barrister Chima Williams. He joins us from Benin City, Edo State, via Zoom. I'd like to say big thank you to you. I'd like to call you Prince Chima Williams for the purpose of this conversation. Good to see you.
Thank you, my brother. Good to see you again.
All right, let's begin this conversation first off by looking at basically the issues around the environment. Of course, you and I some 4 or 5 years ago had talked about how that Nigeria is not in a good place as far as environmental issues are concerned. But first of all, we would always talk about before now these issues from the standpoint of the environmental degradation in the Niger Delta, but this is more than or beyond the issues of crude and exploration in the south parts of the country. Talk to us about what the position of the law is today, as it has to do with what the role of government, particularly agencies of government, should be regarding how we make the most of our environment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee. It's good again to speak with you. You know, we've been discussing these issues quite some years ago, and things seems to be getting worse rather than, getting better. When it comes to the issue of environment, environment is so neglected in this country that, can you believe it, that we do not have a one composite environmental law for Nigeria? Okay, there's no one law that is a compendium of environmental issues as a law in this country. That what we have is skeletal documents and mentions of the environment in different pieces of legislations. The latest we had was the Federal Environmental Protection Act, FEPA Act, which was, put out of use by the coming in of Ministry of Environment. It used to be under the Ministry of Petroleum, sort of. But now, with the coming in on board of Ministry of Environment, we thought that we would have hastened to have a composite environmental law in Nigeria that will regulate activities as it relates to the environment. But be it from it yet. What we have legislations like the Environmental Impact Assessment Act. We have pieces of legislations like the NESDRA Act. We have the NOSDRA Act. We have policy regulations and the rest of them. Yeah, which are proposals, which are documents that may not on its own be enforced in Nigeria as a law. So it means that what we are seeing under the environment sector is something that has been there for a very long time. And none of the ensuing governments since the enactment of environmental creation of a Ministry of Environment, which promoted the FEPA Act. One would have expected that as we speak now, this is 2024, we should have had a composite environmental management law for Nigeria. The last time that was made, I guess, was in 2008. There was an attempt to enact Nigerian environmental law, but that journey died a stillbirth.
The narrative there, no doubt. So as it stands right now, it means our laws are fundamentally, drawing from what you have said, faulty on some levels. But let's talk about the evolution, for want of better words, that we've come to see now with all of these incidences of flooding that were found in this country. Every time we have this conversation, there's always one person who wants to also point to the Federal Ministry of Environment and all of its agencies, including the ones that are supposed to focus on climate-related concerns. And then across the 36 states, including here at the Federal Capital Territory, the nation's capital, we also have the various ministries of environment and what have you. Are these efforts enough to help us fight off the adverse impacts of flooding, such as we have seen in recent times?
Yeah, as we have seen, our efforts are not anywhere near commensurate to what should be done to curtail this menace. As I always say it, the Nigerian state believes in reactive response rather than proactive responses to issues. Even when we know that a proactive response will make things cheaper for everybody and for the country, rather we prefer, when the impact has already occurred, we begin to react. We begin to run helter-skelter. Like the Borno incident, I always remind my colleagues, see, the caving in of the Aloha Dam, it did not happen overnight. It wasn't just something that just dropped. There have been signs, signals, there have been reports, there have been, observations that this dam is caving in, is giving way, and there was no proactive response that could have, sustained the life of the dam by empowering it, to stand still until we saw what has happened. Now, when it comes to issue of flooding, in earlier times, we used to talk of blockage of the drainages and the rest of them. But we've seen that it's gone beyond that. Even though blockade of drainages is on its own a contributing factor for, flooding, because when you block the drainages without desilting them, water must find its level and water must find its way. So if you do not allow it to pass through its natural course, it will create a course for itself to pass. And this is how we find ourselves enmeshed in floods. So always remind ourselves, if the problem is still there and the problem is multiplying every day, to such problems not been adequate. Okay? If it's been adequate, we can control some, and we see how we weather and manage the natural occurrences, that the ones that are beyond human ability to curtail. But in the instance of Nigeria, most of the problems that leads to flooding are man-made, are man-created. For instance, as we are now, NIMET have been warning, giving their forecast on how heavy rains will fall, on how many states, local governments will be flooded in Nigeria. Those forecasts, as it seems to us, falls on deaf ears, because those forecasts are made so that government and all hands should be on deck to take proactive steps. But of course, when the proactive step of government will be to advise residents to relocate to where? Okay, relocate to where? There should be an citizens that we care, and we have always said it. There can be, building of homes that can contain this, something like will be a temporary home on toplands areas that are higher than the areas the flood will come. Build residential areas, just for purposes of taking care of flood victims. So it becomes like a temporary place where at the end of each flooding season, all the people that were there will go back to their normal homes. Okay. But if you continue to say you are doing something by advising residents or citizens to vacate where they are living and seek for alternative homes, when we know how the economic crunch that is in Nigeria as of today, how Nigerians are finding it difficult to survive on their own, let alone when they, resettle to another location, then it means that it is suicide. It's either suicide or death penalty or death judgment being handed down to citizens.
That's interesting and sad all at the same time. But we're going to take a quick break now, Barrister Chima Williams. When we return, we'll talk about whether or not, as relatively weak as the laws are today, they can even bite, so to speak, those who violate environmental laws or commit infractions of any kind that eventually culminates in all of these environmental impacts that we have come to see in recent times. But that will be right after this short break. Stay with us, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. Barrister Chima, just so we are clear about certain issues, in what ways? Because people say if we do the wrong things long enough, they, by default, naturally become right. Okay, so how can we, within the ambits of the law, punish or sanction those who perpetrate infractions that eventually lead to the damage that we see to the environment, whether it's flooding or any kind of degradation that puts people in harm's way? I mean, washing away farmlands, livelihoods, sweeping houses. I mean, see what has happened in Borno State, for example. It's a very sad case in point. Talk to us about how the law can bite in this regard.
Yeah, you see, the biggest challenge we have with the law biting, backing and biting, is the fact that the greatest perpetrators, the greatest infractions against the laws that we have as it relates to the environment is caused by those that enacted the laws, those that are supposed to be policing those laws and enforcing it are the ones that are the greatest, violators. Let's take, for instance, the issue of environmental impact assessment. Now, go into projects and knowing fully well that for any development that occurs anywhere, the environment is the first victim. Do they undertake environmental impact assessment of their projects so that they can determine what will be the intended or unintended consequence? Growth are created without proper drainages. What we think will happen? Okay, the road will be washed away, and with the washing away of the roads is creation of problems for humanity. So yes, our problem is not totally that we do not have anything at all. Like I keep on citing the EIA Act, which is a law already in existence in Nigeria. How far have we enforced it? Who takes responsibility? Legislators are there to make laws. The judiciary is there to interpret the laws. The executive is there to enforce the law. Have the executive of Nigeria from local government authorities to state government authorities to national government authorities, who takes responsibility? Have they been enforcing the Environmental Impact Assessment Act? The answer to me is no, because even where they enforce it, it is very skeletal and minute, and maybe enforcing it against those that do not belong to the power cabal. So those are the ones that suffers it. We have lots of projects that falls within the catchment areas for environmental impact assessment as enshrined in the Environmental Impact Assessment Act that do not pass through that. And when there is no impact assessment, how will you now determine what will be the outcome? What will be the likely consequences of that project or that facility on the people? How then will the people come in? Because, for instance, the Environmental Impact Assessment Act puts the power only on the Minister of Environment to enforce any breach. So as a citizen, if you believe that the Environmental Impact Assessment Act was not followed in a project that you know about, you cannot go to court directly on your own. You have to either plead to the Ministry of Environment for the minister to agree to take legal action, or you have to compel, except you have to take other routes, because for us, we think that creative lawyers have found ways to enforce even the provisions of the constitution of our laws that on their own are not enforceable. You tie it to another law that is enforceable. And we have done this successfully. We have tied, a provision in Section 20, Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution with provisions in Chapter 4 of the Constitution and asked the court to interpret. Okay? And we got a favorable interpretation that right to life includes your right to a livable environment, even though environment is only mentioned in Section 20 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, and not, which is an enforceable chapter of or section of the Constitution. So you pick from the visions in Chapter 2, like right to housing. You can marry it with the right to, life, provisions of the Constitution, and then you can make a case out of it. Because if you do not have adequate shelter protection, you are subjected to incremental deaths. And the Constitution does not allow anybody to die, out of unnatural causes. Have to die as a result of natural causes. Otherwise, it will be an infraction of the Constitution that will need interpretation to understand whether what you did was right or wrong.
Interesting. Let's wrap it up now, Barrister Williams. In 2 minutes, talk to us about how citizens, regardless of level of literacy or awareness about these issues, can also, on some level, to whatever extent, enforce their rights regarding how much these incidences impact them in ways that are remarkably adverse. For example, we go back to Borno State. People, in most cases right now, for apparent reasons, if you like, at some sort of crossroads because they don't know where to go to with their lives anymore on account of these very sad incidents. How can they also hold the authorities accountable at that level, whether it's the state government or the federal government, in such a way that they can get some sort of reprieve for whatever it's worth?
Thank you so much. Vigilance is the first law of survival. So you must be vigilant. You must understand your environment. And when these incidences occur, as even thinking of how to survive for that day, talk less of the following day. What can be done? So, thing is that, for instance, if I am to advise the Maiduguri residents that are impacted by the flood, will be, yes, after recovery, is to sue the Borno state government and the federal government for lack of diligence in protecting them, because the protection of life and citizens of the country is the primary responsibility of the government. So if didn't take proactive steps to protect citizens, it becomes an actionable, offense. So it means for citizens within the constituency of the heaviest impact, if a representative did not take steps to protect them, they can start a process of recall. They can move the House to impeach the governor. They can move the National Assembly, to impeach Mr. President for not taking care of them. Of course, I understand that Mr. President visited, paid visit to Borno State, but is that enough? Will that his visit after death of over 30 persons, will he resurrect those 30 persons? It is for neglect of duty. They should bring them to book. And until we try it, we won't know whether it will work or not.
I've been a part of the program. And that's all we have for you on Scale of Justice, everyone. We also appreciate you for the time you have invested with us here today on Global Television. I'm Uyi Agmofwebe. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.